My name is Jahanshah Rashidian from Germany, a presenter of Rangin Kaman TV or Rainbow in English. Welcome, my dear English-speaking audience, to this TV talk. Today, in 5th of July 2021, we have an important day in the Iranian calendar for the anniversary of the Iranian constitutional revolution in 1905. My guest is Mr. Kourosh Zaim. He chose probably this day, which is an important day for him as well. On behalf of Rangin Kaman TV or Rainbow, and also myself, I thank Mr. Zaim for accepting my invitation for this important talk for the first time. We call this televised discussion an effort into facts. Mr. Zaim lives in Iran and is a member of leadership committee of Iran Council of the National Front. The National Front is an umbrella organization for broad spectrum of political forces, very differently like nationalists, liberal Democrats, social Democrats, Bazari, with trends of secular or traditionally more Islamic. The National Front has been founded in 1949, mainly by our legendary Prime Minister, Dr. Mossadegh. Dr. Mossadegh was the only popular and democratic Prime Minister of Iran. He was holding office from 1951 until 1953, when his government was overthrown in 1953 in a coup d'etat plotted by the United States General Intelligence Agency, CIA, and the United Kingdom's MI6. This coup, of course, changed the course of our contemporary history. Everything was differently happened as it was not actually supposed. And it started with further period of 25 years of despotism of the Shah, and finally ended with the Islamic Revolution in 1979. It is a pleasure for me to receive Mr. Zaim in this TV talk, even virtually, because we hope we can meet one day in Iran. We divide our talk into 3 topics. The first one is a short introduction to the National Front, or we can abbreviate that like NF, which has been founded long before the right-wing National Front or Front National in France, and there is nothing in common between them, but only the name. This point is important, particularly for our democratic diaspora. Then be patient, we will talk about the inauguration of the new president of the Islamic regime. I never say Iran, I say Islamic regime as an entity separated from our people and our country. My guest and the Front National have got also some ideas about the whole thing. And we need now to hear from its represented Mr. Zaim. I give Mr. Zaim the words. Firstly, to greet our English-speaking audience, and to additionally present yourself if you, and of course, the shape of question of the National Front in your views are important to talk to. So you have the words for at least 5 minutes. Just feel free and talk about the subject I just proposed for 5 or any time you want. Please go ahead. Words belong to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rashidian, for inviting me to this discussion. And I'd like to just summarize what happened in 1957, which caused the Iran National Front to take the backseat, and the Khomeini and his followers take over the country. You see, when Shah knew they had to leave the country because of his illness, he has a cancer and had to go out to treat his cancer. So what happened? He talked to 3 of the Iran National Front leaders. One was Mr. Sanjabi, who was the director of the Iran National Front Council, and he was Dr. Sadiqi, who had separated from the council and had an independent group, and Dr. Bakhtiar, who was in the council. Shah talked to Mr. Sanjabi. Mr. Sanjabi that take over the country so he can go and treat himself and hopefully come back and continue his reign. Sanjabi asked him to leave the country. First of all, he doesn't want to leave the country. Not that he doesn't leave for cancer treatment, but just leave the country until he can take control of the country, and so the army would be in place and they could control the country until he possibly come back and continue his reign. Shah did not approve it because he didn't trust that if he leaves the country, not as a trip, as permanently or semi-permanently, that he would lose the country altogether. So he talked to Dr. Sadiqi. Dr. Sadiqi was a university professor, very much loved, and one of the best members of the Iran National Front. He said, "You must stay here." Yeah, and he didn't accept. But to assure Dr. Bakhtiar that the army will not disobey him, I mean, support them, he invited heads of the army, the top generals, in a meeting with Bakhtiar. And General Fardous was also in the meeting. You know, Fardous was a schoolmate of Shah, Mohammad Reza Shah, and they were very good, close friends, but he was attached to the security MI6 of the Britain. And people knew that but of course they were sure of it after the revolution. During that meeting, Shah told the generals, when I leave, you listen to Mr. Bakhtiar. He's the prime minister who you must obey it. So after the Bakhtiar was assured that he has the backing of the army and left the meeting, Shah turned to the generals and said, listen, after I leave, you only listen to General Fardust and no one else. So this, in my opinion, which have studied the situation and at the advent of the revolution, was the cause of Bakhtiar's failure to take over the power and effectively manage the country, because Shah lied to him. But anyway, after Shah left, Bakhtiar had no backup. Army would not listen to him, and Mr. Khomeini also called from France that he must leave his prime ministership before he would discuss the situation with them and negotiate with them about his future as a prime minister. But anyway, that didn't happen, and he had to leave. He left, and the rest of the story is very obvious. He left through Iraq, and he tried to get help from in that country, but did not materialize. So he left, and finally, because he had a lot of followers in Europe, they had it assassinated to make sure that he will not come back. But then that was the cause of Iran National Front's failure to take over the government and rule the country before Khomeini had the time and opportunity to exert his authority. And the Shah knew that in Iran National Front, in the council, the fourth council of Iran National Front, there are a lot of disagreements, because because they did not have, we did not have to practice. They did not have time to practice discussion, negotiation, and give or take in the council. We had the council was forbidden to have meetings since about 15, 16 years after the third council in 1942. So we didn't have any experience. In other words, I know you and I know him, but we don't know how to talk. We don't know how to discuss. We don't know how to negotiate, how to treat ourselves, how to act against this situation in the country. Who does what? Everybody had to have the final opinion, the final thought. That was the main reason we failed to get together, tighten up the relationships and take over the country. I'm sure the country would have supported us, because when the Iran National Front called for demonstrations, at least 2 million people filled the streets, and about half of them went to Mossadegh's place in Ahmedabad on foot and on with cars. So those people who came on the street and demonstrated against Shah at the beginning were all Iran National Front and Iran National Front followers, and but we couldn't. So can you cut
they
this?
Couldn't decide. They couldn't decide.
No. We couldn't take advantage of this very good situation. And people were on the street and they were all supporting Iran National Front. So when Khomeini...
Okay, can I make one single question? If
Yes.
we go back to time, 79, would you accept the prime ministership of Bakhtiar? Are you going to prohibit his position as prime minister, or are you going to be against, propping or opposing? Can you just answer this simple question?
Yes, yes, we
words?
did. Bakhtiar was a very, not only he was highly educated, he was a man of the field. He had work experience with a lot of
we know that. But are you?
He knew how to manage. He knew how to manage.
Okay.
Okay.
So you would accept
yes,
his
of course,
position
because
as prime minister.
The other two, even though they were very learned and good people, did not have any experience in management. Bakhtiar did have.
Okay. And how about Mr. Sanjabi? Because Mr. Sanjabi went to France and kissed Khomeini's hand and also took part in some street plays in Tehran. How about him? How do you judge him now?
I don't judge it very favorably because, first of all, I don't think he should have gone to France. Of course, he didn't intend to go to France. He was on the way to Canada for some meeting,
Mr. Zaim, you were shortly interrupted. So
yes,
you start again, please.
Yeah, okay.
There was an interruption.
I was trying to say that Mr. Sanjabi felt that he deserves the vice presidency because, prime ministership, because he was the head of the Iran National Front. So he's the first one that must be the. So he was very angered when Shah appointed Bakhtiar. So this was the beginning of some tension in the Iran National Front Council. But anyway, from then on, Iran National Front had to take the back seat because by then, Mr. Khomeini has taken his power and he had chosen his cronies to rule the country, and he set up the Revolutionary Council, which did a lot of executions. And the first thing he did, 400 of the very top and very brilliant military officers, the toppest officers, he executed them to make sure that the military, which was a very powerful military, will not intervene in what he had to do. Then he started executing all those people who might have influence in the government of the country, in educational system, economic system. Top industrialists were either killed or
Okay, Mr. Zaim, if you permit, we can start the second part, the second topic, okay, because of the limited time, of course. The second topic is about Iran in these days. Mr. Zaim, firstly, I repeat it, it will be good to start our conversation on the new designated president of the Islamic regime. I repeat, always Islamic regime, never Iranian or any name of republic, because I do not believe that this regime belongs to Iran or is republic. So as I mentioned, Raisi, or namely Ibrahim Raisi, is not the president of Iran or the Islamic regime from today on. Please let me firstly express my own opinion about this man as an independent activist. Mullah Ibrahim Raisi, with blood of many thousands of Iranians on the hands, was likely electoral force is designated to be at the head of legislative power, though legislative power's leadership belongs actually to the supreme leader Ali Khamenei. Anyhow, besides that, Mohsen Ijtihadi was designated as Chief of Justice, knowing that justice in Iran is politically another organ of repression. We know that. We know that this designation is also completed with another hardliner, Caliban, who was already designated as the president of the Islamic Parliament. Knowing that all of these guys are hardliners, please let our audience know your judgment over these designations and the reason or the reasons of them. So words belong to you. Please go ahead. 5 minutes, Mr. Zaim.
Okay, Mr. Rashidian, let me tell you more about Mr. Raisi. You know, considering Mr. Raisi's background in the Revolutionary Judging Committee, known as the Death Committee, where they summarily ordered, there were 4 of them, summarily ordered the executions of tens of thousands of youth opposed to the religious political system. I explained that they had killed all the brilliant and important people in the former government, both in military and in the industry. And told you, it's thousands of youth opposed to the religious political system were killed in 1980s, not just 1983. They started in 1980, and I should remind you that the committee that I just referred to had 4 members. Raisi was one of them. And they started executing best of Iranian industrial and military elite for the first year of the revolution, when the revolutionary government was established, that very first year. They started with 400 of top brilliant military officers and scores of industrialists, educators, and political opponents in 1983, which he is now being framed on. When I was myself in Evin solitary confinement, I used to count the finishing shots of the executions in the courtyard. The noise were coming out from the courtyard, and we used to count it. It was the only only thing we can do. Some nights we counted, and I counted over 100, like 121. And they were killing every night. In 1960, that was 1981. Shots that Mr. Raisi, along with 3 other revolutionary judges, kept the campaign of killing all through 1989. The people of Iran, of course, showed their feelings about Mr. Raisi by boycotting the presidential election. Mr. Raisi's votes were the lowest in the Islamic Republic. Of course, they claim, the regime claims that 40% participation. they count. But I don't believe that because some of the numbers that was leaked from different organizations, like a reporting organization and the radio television organization, brought it down to 20% and even near 12%. In my writings and talks on television before the revolution, and before the election, I had predicted that the people voting in this election will not surpass 10%. Well, anyway, the 12% is something that they had revealed without wanting to. The people of Iran, of course. So what I'm trying to say is that it's obvious that Mr. Raisi is not the Iranian people's choice.
Okay, Mr. Zaim, if you permit, we continue, and when we have time, we can detail all these subjects, okay? But you were just mentioning, and you described the situation under his what's called a commission of death, or death commission, and he was a member of that and executed summarily, or some people say 5,000 and some estimated until 30,000 people in the summer of '88, of course, under a fatwa issued by Khomeini. But after your description of this situation, the whole story, of course, is written in many books, in Wikipedia and so on. Tell us if you think the goal of these designations, the 3 persons that I just named, is to secure more immunity for the regime, only for the regime. If yes, can the regime survive despite multitude crises they have? Above all of them, the legitimacy crisis, or the efforts to survive are ultimately in vain, and it seems to build castles in the air. So you have also the words for another 5 minutes. Describe the future of regime regarding these 3 persons that you described as criminals. Go ahead, please.
It is correct that the regime has tried to control all 3 institutions of the government, like the parliament, the judiciary, and also the presidential. So, but I think it's because, in my opinion, that the Islamic Republic is extremely frightened of its future, and is trying to collect itself, make the government smaller as far as the relationships concerned. So anything they decide, they all agree, and no one would go a different direction. But that would not help them, because people now just not only they cannot, they do not accept the new system of government, worse than all the others that did not like, but they are frightened of what they might do when they become desperate of their safety and of their future. Because you see, they're all thieves. They all have done.
Do you think this? Do you think these people are going to hammer the last nail to the coffin of the regime? That means if the regime made a mistake, a blunder, to designate these hated people, or they can survive the regime. That's the only question. Yes or no?
No,
One sentence.
they will not help the regime to survive because they've done too much crime against people.
Okay.
And a lot of damage to the country. They've taken the country at least 100, 200 years back they've sold the country practically. Everything that was sellable, they sold. Even on the beaches, the sand on the beach, even they sold sand at the beach, and the agricultural soil, water. And people in the country have no water to use or to
drink.
But they sent large pipelines of water to Kuwait and different countries, and they don't fight for a right of water to the dams that Turkey is building, that is taking the water away from us. And the
okay, Mr. Zaim, so you mean
taking all the water from Balochistan.
Okay, they have no chance. That's what you mean. Okay, Mr.
No, I mean they have absolutely no chance.
No chance.
My feeling is that they go in bloodshed.
They are condemned to go to the top pen of the history. I think that's what you mean. Yeah, the dustbin of history. Okay, Mr. Zaim, you recently published an article that I shared also in my Facebook, and it was bravely written and described the regime in detail as a force of occupation, killing our people and stealing their money and natural resources. In my opinion, of course, this is not a magic card to solve the problems of this regime, as you also mentioned. He is only a fear maker, just making people more fear. And you said that it wouldn't work now because people are brave. Our people are warriors. They know this tradition from pre-Islamic warriors like Rustam. So they are ready to dedicate even their life for their freedom and their fundamental right. And the regime cannot survive, as you said. Do you want to add in your article briefly, what is your views regarding with the article you wrote a week ago, I think, despite all risk probably you may actually meet? Go ahead about your article, if you can just summarize that in a few sentences in English. Go ahead, please.
Yes, but I am personally certain that the life of this regime in Iran is very limited. It'll be very short. What I fear about is that when the people again get to the street and protest against the regime, they do something worse than they did 2 years ago and start killing people, because this is my fear. And they might do it because they have nothing to lose. If they have to leave, they have no place to leave. No country will accept them. If they send their money to abroad, and especially in the countries that are they like to go and they can be trusted to be a good. They might actually get all those money that they send, like what they have done now, all of them blocked. If they go there, they might be arrested. If not by governments, by Iranians abroad, for crimes against humanity, for killing. Families might launch legal action against individuals for selling my brother or my son or my daughter. So they're going to be ambushed with thousands and thousands of legal cases. And this is, I feel sorry for them. They don't know what to do.
That is a dark destiny of the totalitarian regimes all over the world, including this Islamic regime.
That is why.
In your article, I read that a few times. I think I published that also. And I want to ask you, do you have some words? Probably, if you want to write another article, do you have some words for our women who are the forerunners in all street protests against the misogynist Islamic regime? Go ahead if you have some words for them.
Yes, you see, I had an idea. I had designed how they could go without hurting themselves and hurting the country, because they know what awaits them if they leave the country. I proposed to them to let's do a change of regime peacefully. We proposed that we will not, first of all, we will abandon the executions will be banned in Iran the minute this agreement is accepted, and they will be protected against people attacking them or even filing criminal action against them in Iran. No, we can't control other countries. And we also told them, all of you have been stealing and pillaging the people and the government and the Iran's wealth altogether. So we're not going to take that away from you under two conditions. One, these were all income without any expenses, any effort. So you have to pay the tax, the income tax on whatever you have stolen or illegally.
Okay, Mr.
And then we told them, well, but you want me to tell the whole design, or we don't have time?
Just in few sentences because of the limited time.
That's as I said, if you,
because I have more questions.
Pay your taxes and invest all the money you've taken in this country. In this country, you will be protected, and no one will fear of no one in Iran. But,
okay, Mr. Zaim, I think I knew your position before this great article. You just apparently you radicalize your thoughts in this article, and even in media in Germany, in France that I follow, there is a very sensitive change. Before, they used to alleviate, to have a tone, soft tone towards the regime. And even some of them urge now that Raisi must be brought before the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity. And they call that Butcher of Tehran. That's the nickname that is also used in Iran, of course. So media, at least in Europe, I know, is now, they probably came to this conclusion that they have to support, at least morally, Iranian people. But there are also a double standard of Europe. as you know, despite of a early solidarity of media and people of Europe, there is now another scandal. The EU Commission or European Commission sent an envoy to participate in the inauguration of Raisi or inauguration of Raisi as the new president of the Islamic regime. The EU Commission shamefully endorses actually this criminal designated president of Ali Khamenei. And of course, I personally condemn that. And I want to know your position about this act of this very unpleasant act of EU. Go ahead and just give us your position about this.
Yes,
Trump,
I mean,
this act.
we noticed that no country sent any of their top positions, like from prime minister down to minister, to participate in the inauguration of Mr. Raisi, except that diplomat from Europe that you just mentioned. And he was being condemned by other people and by Iranian people. And I don't know if he actually participated or not. But everybody boycotted the inauguration. All countries boycotted the inauguration. It tells you something. If you recall, about 10 years ago, when Mr. Ahmadinejad, the second, became president, when he went to speak at the United Nations General Assembly, 2/3 of the audience left the room, if you recall.
Okay, Mr. Zaim. Let me just use the occasion as a German citizen. I say to Ms. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission. Ursula, shame on you. Frau Ursula von der Leyen, Schande über Sie. Shame dich bitte. Okay, that was just a sentence in German because she is German and she was before minister for few cabinets. The third topic is about the ongoing worker strikes actually in Iran in different sectors and their impact on an eruption of protest across Iran, including in Khuzestan. What kind of impact do you see from the working struggle against the Islamic regime, and how serious it can be? Regarding a chain of strikes, do you see a continuity of it as a last nail to the coffin of this anti-Iranian regime? Go ahead for 5 minutes, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the point. You meant the people. What action the people will take?
How do you see the process of this worker strikes that can influence also a general strike, a social movement, probably an uprising against the whole system, the whole regime? That was the question. What is your idea about that? How do you estimate this process?
I'm sorry, because the internet stopped for a few seconds. I didn't get the main point. I'm terribly sorry.
I'll repeat it.
Would you just the main point, if you repeat
the main point,
I'll be glad to answer.
How do you see the connection, the influence of working strike on a general struggle of people, like an uprising, a revolution, a riot against the whole regime? And what kind of consequences can you draw from that?
No, it is a possibility, Mr. Rashidian. It is a possibility, but if that happens, it'll be very bloody. People, they're up to here. They've had it, and they're not going to be very peaceful this time. And also the regime knows that has no place to run to. So that's why we told them a lot of people are so angry they might actually risk their lives just to hurt these people who have destroyed their country. But that's why we're insisting, we're telling them. In fact, I wrote something at the last warning that in my previous writings, I had foreseen 98 and 88 and a few other events of people's showing their disgust for the regime. But this time is not just slogans and walking in the street and marching and waving banners. In this time will be very, very dangerous. And if the regime try to shoot people this time, they're shot back. They'll shoot them back. I know that they.
Okay, we stop on this sentence. If the regime is going to kill people, people might react accordingly. That's what you mean. Where is the limit of non-violent struggle, as you mentioned? My question is, of course, not from you, from the National Front or anything, any organization who wants non-violent struggle. What is the limit against such an uprising, or if you prefer, only civil and non-violent actions, no matter what happens after? The only political struggle to change policies instead of immediately ousting the regime entirely is probably the alternative. But most people want to get rid of the entire regime as soon as possible. So, Mr. Azimi, have you ever heard people saying what we can do if being brutally beaten up? Do we have a self-defense right, as it is written in the constitutions of all democracies and the Charter of Human Rights? Or we have to be absolutely passive and prevent any violence towards the aggressors, which is the regime? What is your description of this situation, and a very clear answer, please? Go ahead.
You see the picture I see, a lot of people who lost everything in different cities, a lot of agriculture is nearly dead, industry is nearly dead, except the industry that the regime itself is managing and owning and managing. But these people who have lost everything have moved to the outskirts of all the big cities. They have nothing to lose. They leave.
Mr. Zaim, do you give self-defense right to people or not? That's my question.
Give them
people
the right.
Have right to defend themselves as described the situation or not? Only say yes or no.
Well, it's a very difficult question to answer because we don't want to encourage the people to shoot back, even though. Of course,
we look the best way, the secure way, with no
people
too
who've
much
lost
damage.
everything.
But I'm talking about the situation in which we have to choose one or another. There is no third way. Okay.
You see, people who have nothing to lose, They've lost everything. They sleep on the street. They sleep in parks and have nothing to lose. They have no
I know
income.
that.
They have no.
We like
anyway,
peace. We like peace.
When people
But
get to the street,
as you say, when the regime should, and people, when the regime bring people and they torture, they even rape them in Kariza.
Let me give you a question that's in my mind.
Yes.
People who have nothing to lose, which is a great deal. It's maybe 40% of the population as such, may attack houses and government offices, and our soldiers, both in army and in Sepah, Revolutionary Guard, and also in the police force. The kids.
I don't mean them, of course.
No, I'm just trying to tell you.
Mr. Zaim, I mean those people like Raisi, whose hand is blood, has blood of people on his hands, as you described that in '88, when thousands of political prisoners who were spending their term of prison were killed, were executed summarily.
Mr. Rashidian, we have reached the point that even a soldier, a policeman, most of them are young, our sons, do not obey the shooting order. And this has happened. This has happened in Balochistan. This has happened in Khuzestan. They will disobey.
Mr. Zaim, Eichmann also told that in the court that he was a soldier, he had to obey the orders. But that's not right. That's a judicial complication, and we cannot talk about that in this time.
Well, that's not right.
Because the time is limited.
A soldier has a right to disobey an order, which can be considered
you are peaceful. I am also for peace. I believe also a general amnesty, especially for those people who have no blood of people on their hands and have not corrupted. Okay, that means the whole soldiers or
that's exactly what we're trying to do. But what I fear, it's the time that these guys insist on pressuring people, insist on shooting and imprisoning people. But I fear that the same soldiers that are supposed to obey their orders turn their guns back toward them. This is my fear. Also. And if that happens,
if there is a strong front of opposition against them, they might join this front of people. That's what I say also, but we can discuss that another time because it's a very complicated, talk that. I want to ask you probably the last questions because the time is very tight and unlimited. Imagine a scenario, just imagine that we are now in free Iran. What are your symbols, wishes for Iran and the people of Iran? How you want to restore Iran? How do you want to build up Iran in your wishes? Just tell me in few sentences, please.
See, these 40 years we've lost, we've gone back.
We know that 40 years. I'm not talking about the future.
What I see, what I want to see, a peaceful transition from this regime to a new constitution, and a democratic constitution based on the international standards, especially United Nations, and a free election, a good constitution, free elections, and a normal government for the country, a country that you don't have to fear them, you don't have to
Mr. Zaim, you believe in republicanism.
Connected? I'm sorry. I thought we were disconnected.
No, I can hear you.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No,
But shortly, because
like
the time is nearly over.
There are three
over.
things important to me. One, do away with this Islamic Republic constitution, which is the worst constitution ever made in the world.
Okay,
in history.
Mr. Zaim, the time is unfortunately over, but I'll let you, the conclusion words, only in few sentences, just make a short statement as conclusion. Okay. Go ahead, please. 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
You see, if you probably read what I wrote, what I proposed. I proposed a normal and peaceful transition away from Islamic Republic, and their constitution is absolutely unacceptable. A new constitution by people that are not involved in the Islamic Republic, and a free election both under the auspices of the United Nations. And then from then on, the new constitution will ensure that no elected person or can stay in office more than the people have decided. We don't want something like China. We don't want something.
We know, Mr. Zaim. We know. I think a steady growing population in Iran. Know the tendencies that economy, diplomacy, security forces, army, everything respond to the agenda of the Islamic regime and their interest, not the interest of people. And that's a very main point. Therefore, we want to get rid of the regime entirely, not a part of that, but entirely. Because any part of that probably is going to fish in muddy water. So we don't leave them any occasion to fish in the muddy water. Okay, this was the real points probably you said at the end. And I think the time is over. And I want you to take part in another discussion if you like. And we can manage it together anytime, because I had many questions here, just wrote them, all of them here to ask you, but the time is over.
I wish you had sent your questions to me so I would be prepared. Next time I will be better prepared.
Of course. Okay, we will do that. We will arrange it. Okay. I know I have now contact with you. Of course, there are some considerations also to respect. You know what I mean, okay? But I will contact you, and you are welcome anytime you want. It would be a great pleasure for me. Thank you very much. And
thank you for inviting me.
Thanks also my English-speaking audience following this program, and also thanks to Mr. Farshad Barasa, who just registered and will publish that on TV, on Rangin Kaman TV or Rainbow. Thank you very much. It's time to say goodbye to all of you until another time. Thank you.